It's time for your Low Country Real Estate Market Update. It's the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Brian is one of the top 1% real estate agents in Charleston. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-345-1273. Now, broadcasting from the WTMA studios, here's your host, Brian Beatty.
Good morning, Charleston. You're listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA. Thanks for joining me this morning. I'm your host, Brian Beatty, and over the next hour, we're going to talk about all things real estate here in the Low Country. I'm going to take your calls this morning, so feel free to give me a call here in the studio. Let me give you that number, 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. And we're going to be covering a lot of ground this morning. We're going to talk first about first-time home buyers and that segment of the market. We're going to talk a little bit about investors and how the two relate. We're going to talk about buying and selling property while it's rented. We're going to talk about if you have your home on the market or you're just looking to hire an agent in general, buying or selling, looking for that wow factor, looking for that agent that really impresses you and what you should be looking out for, what questions you should be asking. And then a little bit later on in the program, we're going to talk about just the stress associated with buying and selling real estate here in the holidays. It's this time of year is usually when things start to slow down for us. That's what we as real estate agents expect, and that's what we tell people is going on, is that, hey, this is the time of year where people start to spend time with family. The holidays are around the corner, and if you have your home on the market, as an example, this is what I usually say. When people ask, how's the market right now? Should we wait until this time next year, or should we wait until the beginning of next year? And usually what I say is that, here's what we should expect. I would expect that we will have fewer showings this time of year. However, I think the quality of the buyers will be a little bit higher. Here's what I mean by that. Usually right around this time of year, that you don't get a lot of tire kickers. In the spring and summer months, we have a lot of people that take a look at real estate because they're vacationing here and they say, you know what, I'd like to move here. Maybe I should hire a real estate agent to take me around for the weekend and show me some properties. We don't see that as much this time of year. Usually the people that are looking at real estate are interested in buying. That's not all of them, of course, but I think the percentages are a little higher this time of year, at least in my experience, of people that are out there engaged in real estate. Usually they're a little more serious, so we're going to talk about that as well. But again, if you have any questions, if there's anything that I say that strikes a chord, you have a story that you'd like to share or a question that you'd like answered, give me a call here in the studio, 843-556-1250. And on a separate note, if you'd like to contact me personally, if you're thinking about buying or selling or investing in real estate, I have been one of the top 1% agents in Charleston since 2009. Would love an opportunity to earn your business. Feel free to give me a call personally. My cell phone number is 843-345-1273. Or you can go to my website, listingsincharleston.com. And on that site, you can take a look at everything I have for sale, everything I've sold, which we're constantly updating. Take a look at everything for sale in the MLS, and if you're thinking about selling, click on the Sell Your Home tab. You can learn more about my 59-day home sale guarantee. You can see a list of properties that I've sold that other agents had listed that did not sell, and of course, you can contact me with any of your personal real estate needs. So let's talk about the first-time home buyer market. I read a report, and for those of you that listen to TMA on a regular basis, you know that I come on every Friday morning and I give a real estate market update on Tara's program. And she asked me about first-time home buyers. She said she read a statistic, and so I searched the internet and I found that story that she referenced. And the story said that this year, first-time home buyers and the sales associated with them have dropped 33% in relation to other years. And that while, of course, sales have gone up, prices have gone up, and overall our real estate market is recovering, it's doing better, first-time home buyers should comprise about 40% of our market. But we're not there yet. And here's why. Of course, we look at the economy, we look at the fact that we've been recovering for several years now. And let's just talk about recent college graduates for a second. Let's say that they get their undergraduate degree and they go out into the workforce, they try and find a job, and they struggle. They don't find the job. They move in with their parents or they rent a property while they look, and they decide, you know what, I just can't find a job that's suitable. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to continue my education. I'm going to increase my skill set. I'm going to hone my skills a little bit, go back to school. Well, of course, the issue with that for many people, many millennials, many younger folks, is that they're taking on incredible amounts of student debt. And I shared with Tara on Friday that if you look at, let's say, 2003, nationally, we had about $250 million worth of student loan debt. This year, we have close to $1.2 trillion. It's more than quadrupled over the past 10 years. So, of course, that has an effect on the first-time homebuyer segment of our market and their ability to get a mortgage. They've got a lot of debt. They've got a lot of bills to pay. And when you go and you try to get a mortgage, of course, they pull your debt-to-income ratio. And if you're not making a lot of money, or if you don't have a consistent track record of earning an income, you don't have a good-paying job, it's just very tough for you to get a mortgage. So I look at the first-time homebuyer market and I say that, you can think about it two ways. You can think about our market from the top down, and what I mean by that is all the luxury real estate and how that's trickled downward, or you can think about it from the bottom up. So here's what I mean by that. First-time home buyers, once they get back on their feet, once they get to the point where they're starting to earn an income that can afford them a home purchase, that's when they move out of mom's house, buy their first house. The house that they buy, that person then goes and buys a move-up home. So that person that's already owned that home, they're going to move into a larger home. Maybe their family's growing. Maybe they've got a new job. Maybe they're making more money. They have the ability to afford a nicer, larger, bigger house. And then it just goes on from there. So if we talk about how is our market going to recover outside of some of the organic things that we need to take into account, like job growth, wage increases, GDP production, all the economic stuff that drives our real estate market, look at the first-time home buyers. They're the key. If we get first-time home buyers back on their feet, that's what's going to allow everybody else to kind of move upward, move toward that luxury market. Of course, not everybody's going to be in the luxury market, but we need the first-time home buyers to help kind of unlock that systemic growth. And so it got me thinking about, let's say at the very bottom of our market when prices were at the absolute lowest, what happened? A bunch of investors came in. They bought all the properties that they could turn a profit on. So they were flipping property, they were buying property to hold on to and to rent. And then as investors saw a really nice return on their investment, other investors decided to get into real estate and buy investment property. And so now let's look at American Homes for Rent as an example. I think they own 600 homes in the Charleston area. And it's getting tougher and tougher to find those deals. But all these first-time home buyers that don't have the ability to get a mortgage right now are renting. And if you look at our rental market, I mean, my God, it has increased dramatically over the past several years. Rents in Charleston are up, I think, 7% just from last year. And last year, they were up a significant amount. So you look at the cost of renting versus the cost of ownership, and in many cases, it actually costs less to own a home than it does to rent a home. But we need to get those first-time home buyers on their feet so that we can then have our market shift upward, and that's what's going to help us recover organically. Of course, that and all the economic stuff that I was telling you about. But let's think about this for a second. What happens when the first-time home buyers get back on their feet? What's going to happen to all these investors that own properties that are rentals? I think you're going to see a lot of those investors put those properties on the market for sale. Here's something else to think about. All the accidental landlords, all the people that bought property at the height of the market that don't have the ability to sell it because they don't have any equity in the home yet. Well, it's been really nice this year to sit down with people that have owned homes for 5, 7 or so years, that bought it at the height of the market, that just haven't been able to sell it because prices haven't got back up to the point where they can sell it. They still owe more than it's worth, or they don't have the ability to pay a commission and closing costs and break even. Well, it's been really nice this year to see that happen. In many areas of our market, we're up double digits again this year. Of course, it's neighborhood specific almost in terms of our recovery. And, if you're thinking about selling your house or you just want to know what your home is worth, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to tell you what your house is worth, and we can do We can do it the long way. I can come by and walk through your house and take a look at your condition and upgrades and tell you what I think it's worth. Or if you want, just shoot me your address. I'll send you everything that's sold in your neighborhood in the past 6 months. Give me a little bit of information to go off of, and I can get pretty darn close to what I think your house is worth. So I'm happy to offer that to you. But I just wanted you all to think about the fact that, our real estate market has recovered in many instances. We still have a ways to go. If we look nationally at the numbers, prices are still down about 15% from the height of the market several years ago. So we still have some recovery left to go here. And if you look at all the expert opinions, the Case-Shiller Index, all that good stuff, they're expecting that next year in the Charleston market, prices are going to go up around 3%, maybe 4%. And I'd have to say that I agree with that unless something drastic changes in the first-time home buyer market. So there's my little spiel on that. When we come back, we're going to talk about buying and selling properties that are rented and the process associated with that. I'm going to talk about buying properties and selling properties, so you don't want to miss this because there's a lot of good information I'm going to cover. Again, if you have any questions, if anything I'm saying is something you'd like to discuss, you have a question, concern, comment, feel free to give me a call in the studio, 843-556-1250, or go to my website, listingsincharleston.com. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. We'll be right back.
Have a real estate question? Ask Brian Beatty. Send him an email, lowcountryhomesales@gmail.com. That's lowcountryhomesales@gmail.com. WTMA. Now, the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues on Charleston's Big Talker, 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back, Charleston. Thanks again for joining me this morning. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. And for those of you that are just joining us, we were just talking about first-time home buyers and how that's going to impact our market moving forward, and how really they are the key to our recovery. Of course, we're doing a really good job with the recovery ourselves, but once we get that portion of our market on the feet, we will continue to recover, and we'll see all those good things that we look for: increase in sales, increase in pricing, all that good stuff. I am taking calls this morning. Would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, anything that I say that you'd like more information on, or you just want to share a story, love to hear from you. The number here in the studio is 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. And of course, if you're thinking about buying, selling, or investing in real estate, I'd like the chance to earn your business personally. I have been in the top 1% of agents since 2009 here in Charleston. Feel free to contact me through my website, listingsincharleston.com. And on that website, you can take a look at everything that I have for sale, everything I've sold. Search the MLS and click on the Sell Your Home tab if you want more information on my 59-day home sale guarantee. Essentially, I'll sell your home in less than 2 months, or I'll sell it for half my commission. Not a bad deal. So contact me through the website for those details. So I want to talk this morning at length about buying and selling properties that are currently rented. It is a very tricky thing to do because, of course, it requires the cooperation of a tenant. So I want to talk first about the fact that when you're selling a house or you're buying a house, the tenant has rights. It's called a lease. And that lease conveys with the sale of the property unless there is language in that lease that states otherwise. So for everybody out there that's a home buyer and you're looking at properties and it's tenant occupied, I want to give you a few things that you and your agent need to be aware of, the questions that you need to be asking so that you don't get caught in a situation where you've spent some money on an inspection and an appraisal, and then you find out at the very end of the process that the tenant doesn't want to move out. And they've got the right to say that because they've got a lease in hand. So let's talk about this. When you're buying a house, first thing you want to do whenever you make your offer is you want to construct the offer so that you have some protection against this tenant, because frankly, you don't know what this tenant's going to do. They're not your tenant. You don't know what the owner has done to pre-screen this tenant. You know, there are so many people out there that are accidental landlords, or they are landlords, they're property managers, and they just don't pre-screen their tenant. You know, I've seen many instances where tenants are living in property where no rental application exists, no background check, no credit check. They have no references. They're just living in your house. Kind of scary. So when you're a buyer, you want to make sure that if you're entering into an agreement with that seller, that seller or their property manager have protected themselves first from this tenant and the rights of that tenant, and that you, of course, protect yourself in the event that tenant chooses not to cooperate. So first thing you need to do is you need to write into your contract that you have the right to review a copy of the lease and any documentation associated with it. And that seller or that property manager better give it to you, because that's important. If they don't, or if one doesn't exist, that should be a red flag. Another thing that you need to watch out for is, in that lease, is there any sort of language that says that once that seller receives a ratified contract, does the tenant have, let's say, 30 days from ratification of that agreement to move out of the property? Or is there no language like that at all? Does that tenant have the right to stay through the duration of the lease? Well, if the tenant has the right to stay through the duration of that lease, and there is no language that basically prompts that tenant to move out once the seller sells it, then you as the buyer might need to negotiate to get that tenant out of there if you really like that house. But it might cost you. It might cost the seller. Kind of depends. But when you, and I'm just looking at my notes here because I want to make sure I cover everything here. Okay, so when you look at the contract and you look at the tenant and what they have in terms of their lease, I would put some sort of time frame on that contract to where if the tenant does not agree to terminate their lease within a certain amount of time, that you have the right to back out of the contract. You need to protect yourself in the event the tenant says, you know what, no, I'm not going to move. And if the seller's not going to pay my moving expenses and give me some money to move out of the property, then no, I'm not going anywhere. So you need to protect yourself and put language in that contract that says that I am not going to purchase this property if this tenant is not going to agree in writing with the owner of that property to move out by a certain date. Another thing you need to put in your contract is that the tenant will actually be out of the property before you close on it. And I would also add on there, of course, that it's clean. I've had, earlier on in my career, I had an instance, and I'll never forget it, where we were showing the property and the tenant was they were just rude. They were just jerks. They did not want us in their house. They did not want to move out. The buyer loved the house, and frankly, it was a really good deal because the seller had to sell it. So we made them an offer, and the buyer actually gave the tenant some moving expenses to move out. He said, hey, here's $1,500. Do with it what you'd like. We'd like to purchase the property. And we put all of these protections in place. And then a few days before closing, we do our walkthrough, and the tenant's still there. They're still living large. I mean, they haven't moved a thing. So obviously the buyer can't move into the property, and they were stuck in a really tough spot. They had to move out of their place with the expectation of moving into this new home, and the tenant was still there. Well, thank God we got them out, and we got them out in 48 hours. I'm not sure what clicked with the tenant, but we had all of our protections in place. We told the seller that if they're not out, we're walking away from the contract because we had the contractual right to do so. And thankfully, we got the deal done. But that was a really big scare and a very stressful time for that buyer because, here we are, 48 hours, 72 hours from closing, and that tenant hasn't moved a thing. So just make sure when you're buying property that you protect yourself contractually. I can't stress that enough. Let's talk about when you're selling a property and it's tenant occupied. Again, if you have any questions about any of this, if you're thinking about selling a property that has a tenant in it or buying a property with a tenant in it, give me a call. Happy to answer your questions. The number here in the studio, 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. All right, so when you're selling a property and it's tenant occupied, there's a few things that you really need to make sure you do to make sure that it's a smooth transaction. Number one, if you have a tenant in there and they were not expecting you to sell the property when they rented the property, then you need to have that conversation with them. And frankly, I think you as the owner can do a better job of helping that tenant understand your situation and why you need to sell. Personally, I don't mind doing it as a real estate agent. I can do it well, but it just sounds a little bit more sincere when it comes from the owner of the property. Now, you want to make sure that if you have that conversation that you're not revealing information that might allow the tenant to take advantage of you if you don't have any sort of protection in your lease against selling the property. But one thing that I've found to be really helpful to kind of soften the blow with tenants is to say something like, you know what, I'm going to give you $100 off your rent. And in return for that $100, I expect you to cooperate when my agent wants to show your property. See, one of the really tough things with selling real estate that's tenant occupied is just dealing with the tenant, because the bottom line is the tenant does not want people going in and out of their house. They have no interest. They have no gain associated with that property selling. So it's a major frustration for them 99 times out of 100. And so as the real estate agent, you've got to be able to smooth over some situations with the tenant, because they're going to arise. That tenant is not going to be happy. And if you've got a property that's priced well and it's in good condition, it's going to sell and it's going to have a lot of showings, and that tenant's not going to be very happy about it. So as the owner, the first thing that I recommend you do is you just have that conversation with the tenant. Soften the blow a little bit. Let them understand that, hey, I've got to sell this property and I really appreciate it if you would cooperate. In return for that, here's $100 off the rent, or whatever the case is. Maybe it's, hey, when we go to sell the property, I'm going to give you $1,000 toward your moving expenses. Again, all of this is situational, and it depends on the lease that you have in place. So for those of you that are thinking about renting your property that might also want to sell it, put a clause in your lease that states that in the event you receive a ratified contract, that tenant has 30 days to move out of the property. You got to protect yourself. Also, when you are selling the property, make sure that you have an addendum in place between yourself and the tenant, because I already mentioned this on the buying side, but on the selling side, it's really important because you're the one that's responsible. Make sure that you have something in writing between you and the tenant that states that the lease and all rights of the tenant terminate on such and such a date. Usually it's about 30 days from the date that you ratify that contract. Of course, you want to make sure that it coincides with the closing date. But again, protect yourself. Make sure that if you're selling a property, you have the right to kick that tenant out if they're not out. And so the last thing that I want to talk about with buying or selling real estate that's rented is what happens if the tenant just decides not to pay the contract or respect it deserves and stay in the property. Well, obviously, if you're a buyer, that's a nightmare situation. If you're a seller, it's a nightmare situation. The only thing that you can do, because you have a lease in place, is evict that tenant. And if you have to evict a tenant, it's going to take at least 30 to 60 days. It depends on whether or not that tenant allows the eviction process to run its course, but that's going to take several weeks. And you as the buyer and you as a seller need to be prepared for that. That's why you put all this protection in place contractually. So let me switch gears a little bit. I still want to talk about buying and selling properties that are rented, but something that people don't know that I find quite often is something called the South Carolina Vacation Rental Act. And this applies to all those properties on Isle of Palms and Folly Beach and Wild Dunes, so on and so forth, that are on weekly rental programs. And a lot of the buyers that purchase those properties are interested in that rental income. In fact, they make it part of their purchase agreement that any rental income from the date that they close on the property forward is relinquished to that buyer. But here's something you have to understand. The South Carolina Vacation Rental Act protects tenants and it protects property managers. And it states that if a closing occurs, rentals up to 90 days after that closing date have to be honored by the new owner. In other words, if you're a buyer and you're out and you're looking at property and you find a rental property on Folly Beach and it has a fantastic rental history, but you want to use it as your primary residence, you need to take into account the South Carolina Vacation Rental Act, which states, again, that those leases, those weekly leases, have to be honored for up to 90 days after the closing. It ensures the property manager's commission and the expenses associated with finding those tenants, and it ensures that the tenant that signed that lease or that agreement has the ability to rent the property for that time. Anything after 90 days, and those tenants will be refunded their money, and the property manager has 45 days to do that, by the way. But very important to note, if you're out and you're looking at property on, Isle of Palms, Wild Dunes, anywhere in South Carolina that's coastal or that has some sort of weekly rental program, you have to take into account the South Carolina Vacation Rental Act. I see it happen a lot with people that let's say we get a new agent in the office and they get this $1 million buyer that kind of falls in their lap, and they're out and they're looking at Isle of Palms properties and they don't really know what questions to ask. And then all of a sudden they find this great house that's on this weekly rental program. They've got a ratified contract. And then they realize, oh my gosh, these people need to move into this house at closing. And I didn't even realize that we have to honor all of those bookings for 90 days after closing. So just make sure that you're taking all of this stuff into account. It's really important. If you have any questions, if you want an example of a contract, if you want language to put in an agreement, happy to help you with that. Or if you want to talk about things personally with me, you're thinking about buying or selling property and you have a tenant in place and you want to figure out how to do that as smoothly as possible, feel free to give me a call. 843-345-1273 is my cell. And again, my website, listingsincharleston.com. Would still love to take your calls this morning. The phone lines are open. The number here is 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. When we come back, we're going to talk about putting your house on the market and hiring an agent with the wow factor. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. We'll be right back.
Visit Brian Beatty's website at listingsincharleston.com. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues next on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. WTMA. Expert news and views on the Lowcountry real estate scene. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back, Charleston. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA. Thanks again for joining me this morning. I am taking some calls this morning, so if you'd like to call and discuss anything, the number here in the studio, 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. Or if you'd like to talk with me personally and privately, considering buying, selling, or investing in real estate, feel free to go to my website, listingsincharleston.com. And on that website, you can take a look at everything that I have for sale, everything I've sold, search the entire MLS from all real estate companies and all agents. And if you're thinking about selling your house, which is what we're going to talk about right now, click on the Sell Your Home tab. You can learn more about my 59-day home sale guarantee. Essentially, I will sell your home in less than 2 months, or I'll sell it for half my commission. So go to listingsincharleston.com for information on that and send me a little message, and I'll send you the details on it. Would love to talk with you about that. On that break, that guy came on and he was talking about flipping properties here in Charleston, and that was a perfect segue into what I want to talk about right now, because I was having a conversation with another agent just yesterday about our market and how the investment side of our market really has changed this year. It used to be that if you were out and you were looking at buying properties to rent out or buying properties to flip, that you could find a good deal about once a week. And of course, this all depends on the market that you're looking within, but we were talking specifically about downtown Charleston. And it used to be, for the past few years, that you could find a good deal about once every week, once every 2 weeks, certainly once a month. But now, so many people are looking at investment properties in downtown Charleston because of the incredible amount of growth that we're seeing, that it is incredibly difficult to find those really good deals to buy and rent out or to buy and flip. And it's almost like you have to be out there beating the streets and talking to owners and knocking on doors and sending letters to people individually before they get on the market, because as soon as they hit the market, man, it gets swarmed by investors. So if you're out there and you're considering buying and then selling, this is what I want to talk about. It's challenging to find the deals to buy. But if the purpose of buying it is to flip it and then put it back on the market, make sure that you're working with a real estate agent. I can't stress this enough. Make sure you're working with a real estate agent that can, of course, assist you on the buying side, but is equally skilled to help you sell the property. Now, it's really important that when you're investing in real estate, you make your money when you buy it. You establish a price that you're just not going to go above, because at that purchase price, the numbers work. Anything above that, the numbers don't work. That's why you establish a ceiling and you don't go above that ceiling when you're buying. But when you go to sell, everything has to come together. I've worked with some investors over the years that will walk through a property and they'll say, well, what's the least amount of money here that I can spend? And I always try and coach them a little bit in that let's not focus so much on what's the least amount of money I can spend. Let's instead focus on what can I do to get the biggest bang for my buck? What can I do to this property to establish a little bit of a wow factor so that when it goes back on the market, it actually sells, rather than just putting a lipstick on a pig? And that's what a lot of investors will do, is they'll go and they will make 30, 40, 50 offers at a time, and sooner or later something will stick, and they'll find a good deal, and they'll make a good purchase. But when they put it back on the market, if they haven't done things to establish value, to increase the value of that property, or if they're working with a real estate agent that just frankly isn't doing a good job of marketing it, then that's the equity that they need to relinquish, that they're just not doing as good a job as they can to unleash. And so, I had kind of an epiphany over the break, and as I heard that, and I was thinking about my cousin Vinny. And I was thinking how, when people go and they think about selling real estate, and I hear this all the time because I make these phone calls to people that are considering selling their house, and they say, well, I've got a brother-in-law that just got his real estate license, or I've got a friend of a friend that sells real estate. And I don't know why, but it made me think of my cousin Vinny and how there are plenty of real estate agents out there that can get the job done. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to throw agents under the bus. But if I found out that I was getting sued and my brother-in-law just got his law degree and passed the bar, and he had been an attorney for a few months, and I'm in a very serious situation where I need top-notch representation, no offense, brother-in-law, hypothetical brother-in-law, but I'm probably not going to hire you. I'm going to hire a professional. I'm going to hire an expert that can get me out of that situation. And it made me think about real estate agents and how there are so many sellers out there that will hire a real estate agent because they're at the right place at the right time, not because they have the accolades and the marketing plan and the ability to sell it for top dollar in the most amount of, or the least amount of time, for the least amount of stress. And so I don't know. I thought it was kind of a funny correlation between the two, but it really is something that I deal with a lot. When you sell your house, you have got to have the wow factor, especially if you're in a market where you have other listings that you're competing with. We just changed MLSs a little bit, like 3 weeks ago, and that doesn't happen very often. I think the last time we changed our MLS had to have been like 15 years ago. So we've got this brand new system that real estate agents are using to search for real estate and send people information and input information, and it's confusing. And there's the learning curve there, and it takes time to get used to that new system. But one thing that I've noticed is that with this new system, and I don't know why, it's actually kind of frustrating, but the pictures of real estate have a worse resolution than with our previous system. It allows for more pictures, which is nice, but the pictures that are online just have a lower resolution. So what does that mean? Bad pictures look worse. So when I'm online and I'm looking at real estate and I'm looking at properties for my buyer, or I'm looking at a property that was previously listed, and I see these pictures that are they're just not good, it really has an impact on your house. That when we talk about the fact that there are 95% of our buyers online looking for real estate, pictures are so incredibly important. And frankly, there's no excuse for bad pictures. Hire a photographer if you can't take good pictures. Do not take an iPhone photo of a property and put it online. It bugs me. And if you have any stories about this, love to hear from you. 843-556-1250. I know that when I list a lot of properties and I talk with the seller and we talk about, have you been searching online for a new home to buy? And they say yes. And I talk about the experience that they have online with searching for homes. And they say, yeah, you know what? You're right. Whenever I see a property that the pictures aren't good, I pass right over it. And it's amazing that something so simple and something that's almost in a way fickle just totally diminishes your ability to sell your property. And so, frankly, there's just no reason for bad pictures online. And I know I've talked about that a lot on this program, but it's a big portion of marketing. And when you hire an agent to sell your house, you've got to have an agent that presents themselves well and has a marketing plan that, frankly, is a little bit of a wow factor, or should be a lot of a wow factor. So when you sit down with that agent and you go through your list of questions and you're interviewing that agent like you should be, ask them what they are doing personally to market your home for sale in addition to what their company offers. That's a big question to ask, because there are plenty of agents out there that either don't have the marketing budget or don't have the know-how to go out and put their own money on the table, pay for marketing, and have it be a good return on their investment. They just don't know. They just rely on what their company provides them with. So when you're interviewing that agent, also consider the fact that you need to determine, do they present themselves well? Because how they present themselves and their marketing plan is going to translate into how they present your property. If it's an agent that's easily frazzled, if it's an agent that really doesn't give you straightforward answers, they kind of talk in generalities, then it might be a sign to continue interviewing for real estate agents, because you need to have somebody that really understands how to market your property for sale, expose your house to as many people as possible in a way that looks good and that's informative and that answers their questions, so that when they express an interest in your house, they have a good idea of what your property is all about. Your real estate agent can answer those questions effectively. And then when they walk through your house, you as the seller have then done the job of making sure that it's attractive, and that you've done your curb appeal thing, and that the inside of the house is nice and clean and well kept and everything is put away and decluttered, so on and so forth. But what I'm getting at here is, when you're putting your house on the market, both the property and the agent need to have that wow factor. So when we come back, I'm going to talk about the stress associated with selling real estate this time of year. The holidays are coming up, and it's just a stressful time of year. So I'm going to help you combat that stress in real estate when we come back. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Again, give us a call here in the studio, 843-556-1250, or go to my website, listingsincharleston.com.
Hear the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show every Saturday morning at 8 on 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. WTMA. Now, here's more of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back, Charleston, to our final edition and segment of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. You know, it's this time of year where it's a really stressful time to buy and sell real estate. We've got the holidays around the corner, and holidays mean family, and family can sometimes mean stress. Or maybe it's just that you've been working your you-know-what off all year, and you need a little bit of a break. You're a little bit worn down, or we've got holidays around the corner and money's a little bit tighter than you might like for it to be, and you've got to buy a bunch of presents and so on and so forth. Bottom line is, this is the time of year where people really kind of realize that they have been going full steam ahead all year, and they need just a little bit of a break. And what that means for real estate, for people that have their home on the market, or for people that are buying homes, is that at times when emotions are running high, you can make a weak decision at a weak point in time. And I absolutely want to try and prevent that from happening with any client that hires me as their real estate agent. Over the past 2 weeks or so, we have been more busy than I thought we would be this time of year. It has been incredibly busy for us over the past several weeks. We've sold multiple homes, and usually this is the time of year where we can relax just a little bit. We start to do our business planning for next year. We start to do all of those kind of planning-based things so that we start 2015 in the right direction. And there's still a ton of activity out there, and it's great to see. I love it. What I'm also finding, however, is that people are a little worn down. Agents are worn down. Sellers are worn down. Buyers are frustrated. Maybe they've been looking for months and they're just not seeing the right kind of properties hitting the market. So they're almost, in a sense, forcing themselves into a property because they want to buy. And then you've got the sellers. Maybe you've been on the market for several months and you've had a bunch of showings, and you wake up every day and you make your bed and you sweep the floors and you keep your home well kept for showings, but you're not getting the offer that you need in order to sell and move on. So it's a stressful time of year. What I want to stress is to not make a poor decision at a point in time where you are run down. And here's what I mean by that. Buyers, I have found, like to, in a way, take advantage of the fact that around this time of year, when sellers have been on the market for several months, let's say that you've been listed since spring, or let's say you've been listed since the beginning of the year and you haven't sold yet. A lot of buyers will go to those sellers and say, you've been on the market for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and you haven't sold yet. Here's an offer. I understand it's low, but if you haven't sold yet, then that just tells me that your house isn't worth what you're asking. So it's an environment where we usually see lower offers, unless, of course, your home is really well priced and it's in good condition. So we see lower offers, which causes stress. We have sellers that have been on the market for several months, which causes stress. It is not easy to wake up every day and clean your house and have people come through it and it just not result in anything. And this is also the time of year where people have listing agreements that are expiring. They hired their agent for 6 months in the spring and the house hasn't sold. And so now the seller is faced with the decision, do I hire a new real estate agent or do I stick with the same real estate agent that I've had over the past several months? Well, one thing that I want you to ask yourself is, if you choose to stay with the real estate agent that you hired, what are you expecting to happen that's going to be different from what happened over the past several months? What are they going to do differently to achieve results? You need to ask yourself that question. You need to ask that question of your agent, because if they're doing the exact same thing, chances are you're going to get the exact same result. So again, I don't want anybody out there listening to this program to make a weak decision at a weak point in time when you're feeling a little run down. Make sure, even if it's painful, even if you're tired and worn down, interview your agent. Make sure that you're asking the right questions. Make sure that they've got a marketing plan that, like I said in my last segment, has that wow factor. Make sure that the real estate agent doesn't look tired. If your real estate agent comes to your house and you interview them and you can just get the sense that, man, this agent they must have been through the ringer this year, or they are just tired. If they don't have the energy to put forth 100% effort in selling your house, that should be a red flag to you. Make sure that you're looking at hiring an agent that you honestly feel is going to commit themselves to selling your house and giving 110% toward that goal. Another thing that I want to just say before we end this program is that right around this time of year, we also realize that, man, we've been working really hard and I've gotten a little bit out of my routine. Let's try and take a little bit better care of ourselves. Let's either get in the gym or eat better or find something that allows us to relieve some stress. Let's try and be a little more proactive in being nice to one another and not letting all of the emotion that we always have this time of year cloud our judgment and prevent us from making good business decisions. So if there's anything that I can do for you, if you're considering buying or selling a home or investing in real estate, please give me a call. My number, 843-345-1273. That's my cell phone. Or go to my website, listingsincharleston.com. And if you're in a position where you need to put your home back on the market and you don't have the luxury of waiting until the beginning of the year or spring of next year to sell your home, then go to that website, listingsincharleston.com. You can learn more about what I do to market my properties for sale by clicking on the Sell Your Home tab. Sell Your Home right there on the main page. It'll show you what I do to market my properties for sale. It'll show you the listings that I've sold that other agents have not this year. And you can learn more about my 59-day home sale guarantee at 4.5% commission. Essentially, I will sell your home in less than 2 months, or I will sell it for half my commission. So again, listingsincharleston.com is the website for that. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I appreciate it. I always appreciate being on the air and speaking with all of you. Again, if I can do anything for you, listingsincharleston.com. Have a fantastic weekend. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning from 8 till 9. Contact Brian Beatty online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-345-1273. 843-345-1273.